It is the early hours of June 9th, 1944. The beaches of Normandy are bleeding, and the Allied invasion hangs by a thread. Deep in his command center, Adolf Hitler holds a piece of paper that will decide the fate of the Second World War. It is an urgent, top-secret dispatch from his most trusted, highest-paid spy operating inside Great Britain. The intelligence is devastatingly precise. It outlines exactly why the Normandy landings are nothing but an elaborate, bloody trap. The real invasion, the spy insists, is coming weeks later at Pas de Calais. Based entirely on this single typewritten page, Hitler makes a fatal, irreversible choice. He orders his elite panzer divisions to halt. He holds them back. Here's the thing about that master spy. He did not exist. The dispatch that paralyzed the most terrifying war machine in human history was drummed out on a sticky typewriter in a cramped room by a failed Spanish chicken farmer. A man with absolutely zero military training who was sourcing his intelligence from a railway timetable, a tourist guide, and a Portuguese-English dictionary. He created an illusion so massive it broke the Third Reich. It was absurd. It worked perfectly. To understand how a nobody tricked Hitler, you have to look at his resume. Joan Pujol Garcia was not a natural-born killer. He wasn't recruited from the elite halls of Oxford or trained in the dark arts of covert ops. He managed a poultry farm in Spain, and he was terrible at it. But the Spanish Civil War had given him a front-row seat to the crushing realities of both fascism and communism. He hated totalitarianism with a quiet, burning intensity. When World War II broke out, Pujol made a decision. He was going to destroy Nazi Germany, personally. He did what he thought was logical. He walked into the British embassy in Madrid and offered his services as a spy. British intelligence looked at the balding, unassuming man with zero qualifications and politely showed him the door. 3 times. They thought he was a crank. Most people would have given up. Pujol didn't. If the British wouldn't hire him to spy on the Germans, he would just have to force the Germans to hire him first. He created an alter ego, a fanatically pro-Nazi Spanish official traveling to London. He approached the Abwehr, German military intelligence, and pitched himself. Incredibly, they bought it. They gave him a crash course in invisible ink, handed him $3,000, and ordered him to infiltrate Britain. Pujol said yes. Then he took their money and moved to a cramped apartment in Lisbon, Portugal. He had never even been to the UK. How do you run an espionage ring in a country you have never visited? You go to the local library. From his stuffy room in Lisbon, Pujol began bombarding his German handlers with highly detailed intelligence reports about British troop movements. His classified sources? A standard map of the UK, a tourist guidebook, and a railway timetable. He was entirely winging it. He once warned the Abwehr that men in Glasgow would do anything for a liter of wine. He had no idea the Scottish drank beer and whiskey, but the German high command, blinded by their own arrogance and desperate for assets inside Britain, swallowed every word. Soon, the intelligence output became too massive for one man to justify. So, Pujol started hiring. He recruited a disgruntled Venezuelan student in Glasgow, a Welsh fascist hiding in Swansea, a loose-lipped censor working inside the Ministry of Information. Slowly, meticulously, he built a sprawling, highly effective espionage network spanning the entire British Isles. 27 active sub-agents, all risking their lives to feed him secrets. None of them existed. They were phantoms born from the relentless clicking of Pujol's typewriter keys. Here is the psychological brilliance of the con. Pujol understood that to sell an impossible lie, it has to cost something. You cannot just invent fake intelligence, you have to build a bureaucracy around it. He submitted agonizingly detailed expense reports. He billed the Abwehr for his phantom agents' train tickets, their hotel stays, their bribes, and their salaries. When he needed to explain why an agent missed a deadline, he invented a severe illness. He even killed off one of his imaginary spies in a real bombing raid, and then successfully billed the Nazis for a fake widow's pension. They paid every cent. When British intelligence, who were actively intercepting German radio traffic, realized that some rogue civilian in Portugal was single-handedly confusing the entire Abwehr, they finally brought him into London. MI5 gave him a codename fitting of a master performer, Garbo. By the spring of 1944, the Allies were preparing for the invasion of Europe. But they had a mathematical problem. If the German panzers rushed the beaches of Normandy, the invasion would drown in its own blood. They needed a distraction. They needed an army of ghosts. Enter FUSAG, the first U.S. Army group. It was a massive, terrifying invasion force commanded by General George S. Patton, stationed right across the English Channel from Pas de Calais. It had tanks, staging areas, and endless radio traffic. It was completely fake. The tanks were inflatable rubber, the barracks were empty wooden husks. But a rubber tank is useless unless someone tells the enemy it is real. That was Garbo's job. Working out of a secret MI5 office in London, Pujol went into overdrive. He used his network of 27 imaginary spies to flood German intelligence with frantic reports. The narrative was unified and deadly. Normandy was just a diversion, a bloody tactical feint. The real catastrophic blow was coming to Pas de Calais. Why did the German high command believe a Spanish chicken farmer over their own logic? It is a basic rule of psychological manipulation. You don't tell a mark what you want them to believe. You tell them what they already want to believe. Hitler looked at the map. Pas de Calais was the shortest route across the Channel. It made the most strategic sense. Garbo didn't create their bias. He weaponized it. Then came D-Day, June 6, 1944. Allied troops stormed Normandy. The German generals panicked, preparing to unleash their reserve panzer divisions to crush the beachhead. But on June 9th, Garbo transmitted his masterpiece. He sent a painstakingly detailed, urgent message swearing that Normandy was a trap designed to draw away German reserves before Patton struck Calais. Hitler read it. He issued the order. The panzers stayed put. The ghosts held the line. Living a double life is a psychological meat grinder. Living 28 lives simultaneously is a fast track to madness. The strain of orchestrating an imaginary espionage ring, working 18-hour days, and keeping the lies mathematically consistent began to fracture Pujol's reality. But the greatest threat to Operation Fortitude did not come from a Gestapo hit squad. It came from a deeply frustrated, homesick Spanish housewife. His wife, Araceli, was suffocating. She despised the English weather, the rations, and the agonizing isolation of their secret life. One afternoon, she snapped. She demanded to go home to Spain, threatening to walk straight into the Spanish embassy and blow the entire operation to pieces if they tried to stop her. MI5 panicked. If she talked, the beaches of Normandy would turn into a slaughterhouse. Pujol, however, understood deception better than anyone. He orchestrated a cruel, brilliant piece of psychological theater. He had British intelligence arrest him. Araceli was blindfolded, driven to a secure camp, and brought before a fabricated military tribunal. There, she saw her husband locked in a cell, disheveled, facing execution for her treason. The shock shattered her rebellion. She begged for his life, weeping, swearing absolute silence. Pujol was mercifully released. He saved D-Day by gaslighting his own wife. How does a man who broke the Third Reich go back to a quiet life? He doesn't. When the war ended, Pujol was a marked man. Surviving Nazis and humiliated Abwehr officers had long memories, and they knew they had been played. So the ultimate spy pulled off one final perfect illusion. In 1949, with the help of British intelligence, he traveled to Angola and promptly died of malaria. The paperwork was meticulously filed. The grave was dug, the ghost vanished. In reality, he slipped away to Venezuela, opened a bookstore, and lived in absolute obscurity for decades. He walked among ordinary people, a phantom who had quietly held the fate of millions in his hands. History remembers the blood on the beaches, the roaring engines of the panzers, and the atomic fire. But the greatest deception in human warfare was not built with steel. It was forged in a cramped, stuffy room by a failed chicken farmer, armed with nothing but a dictionary, a restless imagination, and the deadly, rhythmic clicking of a typewriter.